Finding the medieval city in Norwich's modern layout. Just as York is synonymous with Vikings, Colchester with Romans, Ironbridge with the Industrial Revolution, and Bath with the Regency, when visitors to Norwich carry out even the most superficial research, they are encouraged to think Norwich, think medieval. Tourism marketing makes the claim that Norfolk's county town is the country's best preserved medieval city, but that proposition was also supported by the renowned scholar of architectural history, Nicholas Pevsner. Best known for his monumental 46-volume series of county-by-county guides, he asserted that Norwich has an undisturbed medieval centre with winding streets and alleys. Perhaps the buoyant thrust of this dynamic 21st century city, with its office blocks, high street stores or shopping malls, and traffic congestion, might disappoint the first-time visitor wanting a Camelot-like theme park medievality. For although Norwich is not a place of high-rise development or significant industrial activity which might have a masking effect, the detail of the city's medieval heritage is not immediately apparent, with the exception of its fortress-like castle and its sublime Romanesque cathedral. Both are of Norman construct and still dominate the skyline. Medieval Norwich is contained and enveloped only within the early 14th century walled area of the city, now the civic and commercial centre, where there is tangible evidence of a rich history amongst its streets and lanes, its numerous ecclesiastic, secular and civic buildings, and the meandering River Wensum, once the arterial link to the world beyond the North Sea. Norwich is a city of centuries, with a 1,000-year history of growth and great prosperity. But it also suffered plague, rebellion, economic decline, and bomb damage, followed by a post-World War II renaissance. It is therefore not unreasonable to conclude that although the medieval period was arguably Norwich's golden era, the continuous building, redevelopment, adaptation and demolition which accompanied the growth and decline means that it is not just a question of what can be seen of the medieval city from today's layout, but what can be observed and learned through a knowledge of its history. It is then that the past is revealed. So what is the first impression that today's visitor to Norwich has when he or she arrives in search of its medieval heritage? Unlike many cities in England, there is little protracted sprawl of 20th century suburbanisation before signs proclaim, "Welcome to Norwich, a fine city." To the south, the southern bypass acts as a clearly defined boundary. Arable farmland on the exterior, and generally grander scale late 19th century housing development inwards along the Newmarket and Ipswich roads towards the city centre. To the north, west and east there is a similar abrupt divide between countryside and housing, with a band of 19th century and 20th century middle-class habitation and council estates encircling the old medieval cities, whose gates and defensive walls were systematically dismantled between 1790 and 1810. Although the city does not have the beautifully preserved walls found in York, which were also to have been demolished but saved because of fierce local opposition, it is Norwich's flint-built defences that serve as the first indicator of Norwich's medieval heritage for the visitor. The walls were completed in 1343, mainly through the generosity of merchant Richard Spink, but a deed of 1175 mentioned much earlier bank and ditch defences. Although the construction was nominally a military fortification, it certainly added a great deal of control of trade by hindering access except through the gates and by facilitating the collection of tolls. The walls did not completely encircle the city, but on its eastern edge it was believed that the north-south flowing River Wensum would provide an efficient natural barrier in times of conflict. Nevertheless, it was felt necessary to control the movement of traffic on the river, and still extant by Conisford at the southeast limit of the city are twin boom towers, which had two great chains of good Spanish iron strung between them, across the river, so that no barge or boat might come in or depart without leave, nor against the will of those who govern the city. The walls, 4 metres in height, with over 40 towers and 12 gates, were emblematic of Norwich as a cohesive entity for nearly 500 years, but have suffered grievously, although considerable sections remain. Today, on wooded Carrow Hill above the Wensum, the visitor can still walk in their shadows, touch the cold black face of their flint construct, and sense the pride and awe that medieval Norwich man and woman must have seen in this affirmation of a strong and secure city. But antiquity was not popular in the late 18th century. The civic elite were keen to lift the burden of inherited medievalism, and the constrictive effect that the man-made barrier had on trade and commerce. So the gates were removed and the wall fell into disrepair, engendering a rush for expansion and house building beyond the line of fortification in what had previously been a sparsely inhabited rural landscape of farming and heath. Once inside the heart of today's modern and relatively small city of Norwich, the visitor might well be drawn to the imposing castle, set high on its mound and still visible from every quarter. That was the intention when it was first raised 9 centuries ago, between 1066 and 1075, and it is now recognised as architecturally the most ambitious secular Norman building in Europe. The Norman invasion under William the Conqueror was a massive shock for the Saxon community. Using forced labour, the castle was built on the site of 98 demolished houses, as a symbol of power and political control over the indigenous population. However, it was never occupied by lordship, nor acted as a military base with a garrison of soldiery, but from 1220 was used sporadically as a jail and place of execution until its formal conversion as the city's prison in 1789. Today it is the home to the Castle Museum, with its fine archaeological collections and art galleries, one reason why it is a magnet for the multitude of visitors to Norwich. Apart from the vista of the city that may be enjoyed from the heights of Mousehole Heath to the northeast, or perhaps from the lofty prospect from St. John's Cathedral Tower, the Castle Mound is the ideal viewing platform for a panoramic, full-circle, bird's-eye view of Norwich, and it is the city's ecclesiastical heritage that is revealed in one sweep. For in addition to the springing fountain of stone that is the spire of the Anglican Cathedral, A multitude of flint-grey medieval church towers appear like map pins pressed firmly through the lamina of more recent development and into the medieval urban landscape of yore. Norwich has a worldwide reputation for having the largest collection of urban medieval churches north of the Alps, and it has been proposed that between the 11th and 12th centuries there were 58 in active service. Remarkably, 31 of these national treasures still stand today, and all may be visited, at least externally, during a 2-hour walk around the streets of the city. Only 8 are still in use as parish churches, while the remainder are in the care of 2 conservation trusts, and have a diverse range of usage, from performing to martial arts, and from antique showrooms to a cardboard box storage facility. It is their flint construct which makes recognizing a medieval church a straightforward process, although later Victorian copies can be misleading. But flint architecture is a complex and highly specialized field. All Norwich's medieval ecclesiastical structures, excepting those of Norman origin, were built from the material, but this was not because of style or fashion, but because there was a deficiency of better building stone in East Anglia. While the mineral is hard and durable, it is readily fractured by impact, so is difficult to work. Most of the flint for Norwich construction probably came from the Brandon area, where it was mined straight from the chalk and unstained, and it was a pure, strong black when knapped. Because of this, there is a pervading medieval ambience amongst Norwich churches, and this was reinforced by untypical flintwork techniques, which created a similarity in the tower parapets of several city churches in Norwich. By their number and fine construction alone, the parish churches of Norwich are still a visually important reminder of the urban medieval landscape. However, it was the cathedral, with its Benedictine priory, that became the ecclesiastical powerhouse in the early 12th century. Since its inception in 1096, when a principal area of Saxon development was erased for its construction, and through the centuries that followed, there have been many architectural rearrangements to what is a soaring monument of medieval masonry. The complex of buildings, still virtually complete, continues to inspire visitors or those who go to pray within the naive solidity of its structure. Surrounded by its own walls and incorporating 2 triumphant entry gates, the cathedral stands within a formidable medieval enclosure known as the Close, England's largest precinct, extending over 44 tranquil acres and containing 83 listed buildings which echo the cathedral's monastic past. One of these is the Carnery Chapel from 1316, which now houses King Edward VI School, but in the medieval period it was a repository for human bones, if they were dry and clean of flesh. At the northeast extremity of the Close, and in the meadow crook of the river, looms the imposing bulk of Cow Tower, the oldest brick construction in Norwich, which has served as toll house, dungeon and military garrison. Close by, but just beyond the cathedral precinct, lies the Great Hospital, founded by Bishop Suffield in 1249, and still in use today for the accommodation, succour and support of the aged and infirm. Visitors to Norwich often take the opportunity to rest a while in the haven of the city close, before returning to the hubbub of the town in search of more antiquity, and there is one further ecclesiastical edifice for them to relish. This is the early 15th century church of Blackfriars Abbey, a Dominican order who became popular and influential in religious medieval life as they worked openly within the community, as opposed to the monks hidden in their cloistered priory. From the cathedral to Blackfriars, it is necessary to tread some of the city's oldest streets, following the indelible layout of Norwich's medieval thoroughfares. The first of these is oddly named Tombland. It has nothing to do with dead bodies, but comes from the old Scandinavian for an open space. It is a triangular, tree-lined area of fine, apparently Georgian townhouses whose facades hide much earlier buildings. On the main north-south arterial route through Norwich, this quarter contained the Anglo-Saxon Scandinavian marketplace, prior to its resiting by the Normans, and now, as then, slopes northward to the River Wensum, passing the Maid's Head, the UK's oldest hotel, and on to the city's oldest river crossing, from the Saxon Viking period at Fye Bridge. Before that is reached, the visitor turns into Elm Hill, the archetypal English medieval urban street, a scene of cobbled quaintness with its pin-up image on many Norwich calendars and postcards. Most of the tightly packed houses here are of immediate post-1507 build, the year that the city was devastated by fire and 700 houses razed to the ground. Perhaps this is an explanation as to why so few medieval domestic buildings survive in the city. But this street was filled with the homes of the great and good, including 16 mayors, wealthy merchants such as Augustine Steward, mayor, alderman and negotiator during Kett's 1549 rebellion, the wealthy Pettus family, and most celebrated of all, the Paston family. Margaret Paston's letters are the most complete extant record of English provincial medieval life. At this point there may be an opportunity for weary visitors to rest their legs and check their bearings. Under the shade of the last remaining tree in Elm Hill and behind the Britain's Arms coffee house, which has provisionally ceased trading. The thatched building is a unique surviving example of an early 15th century beguinage and reputedly Norwich's oldest continuously occupied property. Remarkably, should the current city tourist plan be laid alongside a copy of Taylor's Map of Norwich before the dissolution of the monasteries, today's roads and streets are a near identical match to those of the pre-1530s, apart from an area around the castle and one sector of Norwich Ultra Aquam. So it seems that neither medieval man nor modern woman would be topographically disorientated should they find themselves in the other century, and would have little difficulty following either map through the maze of ancient streets towards the civic and commercial trading hub of Norwich, the marketplace. It was mentioned earlier that the Normans had wanted to impose their will and control over the populace, and this was achieved through dramatic changes in the urban landscape of Norwich. The razing of the mighty castle symbolized the physicality of their domination, and the destruction of a large area of the old Scandinavian town to make way for the cathedral emphasized the permanence of their mission. But then, just as today, it was the economy that ruled men's lives, so all commercial activity was constrained in a new and very large market area within sight of and beneath the castle. To add insult to injury, a new borough was established above and beyond the market in hitherto open fields to provide Lebensraum, or rather Space Vital, for French settlers who had followed the military conquerors. The common trading folk of Old England were surrounded. Today, the new City Hall from 1938 sits on the edge of Mancroft Ward, overlooking England's largest open-air market, with the castle as a backdrop. For visitors standing on the wide sweep of steps of Norwich's inspirational Art Deco municipal headquarters, the outlook presents a breathtaking but jumbled timeline, because here in actuality is the city of centuries before their eyes. To the north lies the medieval lanes area, fronted by the early 15th century napped flint Guildhall, a predecessor from 1414 of the current City Hall. To the northeast, the flamboyant Edwardian Jarrell's department store stands close to Lloyd's Bank of similar vintage, with its confident classical columns. Georgian-fronted inns with 20th century shops below entice customers, as does the glorious Art Nouveau-style 19th century Royal Arcade. Further to the south along Gentleman's Walk is the Old Jewry, whose buildings originated in the 12th and 13th centuries. Facing the Jewry is a multi-gabled house of medieval construct converted to the Garnet Wolsey pub 4 centuries later, and behind that soars the 15th century tower of St Peter Mancroft, the city's grandest parish church and initially of Norman construct. The Forum, Norwich's most recent architectural wonder, returns the visitor to the 21st century. But it is the vibrant rectangular space framed by all these buildings that is the true medieval survivor from Norman times, when the marketplace was imposed upon the citizens of Norwich by their new masters. It remains the focus of life in the city today, and as has been discussed, the streets and lanes radiating from this core are just as they would have been laid out nearly 900 years ago, and a sense of that history permeates the city today. There are other scattered medieval gems, such as the unique 1427 Trading Hall, belonging to merchant and civic leader Robert Topps, and now known as Dragon Hall. Nearby is the oldest surviving house in Norwich, which belonged to Isaac Jernert, the wealthy Jewish financier from 1225. Both are close to the edge of the old city, near the southern walls and the river at Lower Conisford. Nearer to the town centre stands the Bridewell Museum, originally the family home of William Appleyard, Norwich's first mayor in 1404. Its north wall is a marvel of flintwork, black and shiny flints square cut so finely that the whole wall is made without cement. Another museum, Strangers' Hall, is an intact 14th century townhouse and completes the portfolio of properties that belong to the urban elite. For many Norwich residents, the city's roots are often taken for granted. Shoppers are blinded by the pursuit of bargains, while office workers rush to and from their desks or head for home. But there are many too who know this place well and love its ancient soul, for this is one of England's best researched cities. With some preparation and a sense of adventure, the visitor too will find that Pevner's proposition is confirmed. This is an undisturbed medieval city.